What makes games special? Let's skip over the tired "are games art" discussion and just assume they are. That's how we get to have the interesting conversations. For my money, the thing that only games are capable of is forcing empathy on the audience. If I watch a movie or a TV show, sure, I care about the characters, but do I know if they're hungry? Do I know if their joints are aching? Basically, do I know what it feels like to be them? In games, not only do you know, but it's pretty much the first thing you know. After the opening cutscene establishes the premise, you immediately start to learn what being this character is like through the design of the gameplay itself. Hi there. My name's Henry, and I like talking about the small details that make the things I love so great. I often find that in order to understand how to do something well, you first have to establish what it looks like when it's done poorly. And, because mama ain't raised no quitters, my example of weak character-focused design just so happens to be one of the greatest games ever made. Now let's take a dump on it. God, I'm gonna regret this. Breath of the Wild does a pretty awful job of establishing Link as a character. Obviously, because he doesn't have a character, I get that. Bear with me, I'm doing something here. When you look at him walk, or jump, or just look at his face with his gorgeous eyes and that come-hither stare and those kissable lips and that... What can you tell me about him? Not much, right? Not much more than that he's a blandly heroic milquetoast cipher.
Trademark, trademark, trademark.
Breath of the Wild doesn't bother characterizing Link because outside of cutscenes, he doesn't have to be a character. He's a vessel for your will. And even in cutscenes, he isn't particularly active. Now, when I said I was going to take a dump on Breath of the Wild, I was lying. Because I think making Link a BHMC
Trademark, trademark, trademark.
is the perfect choice. Because the game isn't really about Link. It's about the world of Hyrule. It's about getting to know the landscape, the wildlife, the topography, and the cultures you encounter along the way. With a sandbox of locations, abilities, and environmental systems as broad as the one in Breath of the Wild, player desire is the only driving force that matters. By the time you glide off the Great Plateau, controlling Link is designed to feel effortless, like an extension of your own will. You want to climb that mountain. You want to fight that monster. You want to solve that puzzle, and Link courageously obliges. Second to second, Breath of the Wild isn't about Link's story, it's about yours. Whatever story you want to be told. The real world is full of so many different types of people, each with their own baggage and interests, so if a game wants to offer an experience that can be welcoming to all of them, there can't be any friction between the desires of the player and the abilities of the player character. Link is meant to be perfectly competent at every part of his adventure, and that's the right choice for a game so dedicated to player expression. But it does limit what Breath of the Wild is capable of doing. Breath of the Wild can tell an infinite number of stories, but it has trouble telling a single focused narrative. And if that's your goal, then establishing your characters through their gameplay, the thing you engage with the most when playing a game, is vital. Now, while controversial, The Last of Us Part 2 does feature some very interesting design choices, not least of which being its dueling player characters.
Get it? Because they fight.
A lesser game would just copy and paste different models onto the same framework and call it a day. But Last of Us goes the extra mile and really differentiates its player characters. Let's begin with their similarities. Well, first of all, they control exactly the same. You press the crouch button and she crouches, you hold the crouch button and she goes prone, you pull the left trigger to zoom in, and you pull the right trigger to kill some guy named Jerry. Doesn't matter which she you happen to be controlling at the time, everybody's killing Jerry's.
But H-Dog,
I hear you say.
of course the controls stay the same. They're not gonna change something so fundamental halfway through a game. That's crazy, you're stupid.
And I've got 3 things to say to that. First, no you. Second, are you gonna tell Japan or am I? And third, yeah, duh, I know, but what does keeping them the same do? How does it feel? What does it mean? This identical control scheme has 2 effects, one on the characters and one on the player. On the character side, you know that Abby and Ellie are equally competent. They're both quick, athletic, and lethal. This isn't anyone's first rodeo, and they're both well accustomed to surviving in these harsh and violent times. They feel like an even match. Neither of them feels like they could steamroll the other, which, when they finally come to blows, raises the stakes of the encounter because you know intuitively as a player that, left to their own devices, the outcome could easily be a toss-up, which in turn empowers the player to act as the deciding factor. Establishing the two characters as equals can easily be done through the dialogue, or the collectibles, or some other tangible method, and it is. But when you do it through gameplay, again, the thing you engage with most, it happens instantaneously. And as for the player effect, let's be honest, the transition from Ellie to Abby is jarring as hell. Being thrown into the shoes of the person who has been your sworn nemesis for the last 10 hours or so is a radical challenge on your empathy, and it would be pretty much impossible to pull off if you had to spend the first 6 minutes relearning how to play. This preservation of immersion allows the player to remain firmly rooted in the narrative they're experiencing and key into all the subtle details that have changed. That's right, folks, it's the moment you've waited 6 whole minutes for. Let's talk about differences. When it comes to the experience of play, the difference between Abby and Ellie is clearest when looking at their arsenals. On the surface, they both have the same types of weapons: a pistol, a rifle, a sidearm, a shotgun, a bow, and a BFG. Not really, but how wild would that be, right? But while the categories may be the same, the devil, as they say, is in the details. To start, their pistols are exactly the same, but their rifles could not be more dissimilar. Ellie carries a long-range hunting rifle, while Abby sports a semi-automatic assault weapon, and each fills an entirely separate role in gameplay. Ellie uses hers to carefully snipe her enemies, lining up headshots from a distance, shrouded in the tall grass, like an ambush predator stalking their prey. Abby, on the other hand, uses her rifle to spray as many bullets downrange as is physically possible, ensuring that the only thing left of her target is hot lead. Their sidearms are both situational, but for two completely different situations. Ellie's revolver is good for scraping out of tight spots when your back's against a wall, while Abby's hunting pistol is built to turn brain into vapor from the other side of the map. Ellie's shotgun is a reflex weapon, reached for when you need to get a nasty out of your face and you don't have time to ask. Abby's is more about doing as much damage as you can with a single shot, more about being proactive than reactive. Both their bows fill the same role in combat, silenced long-range sniper, but while Abby's crossbow bolts feel cheap and punchy, every one of Ellie's arrows feels precise and deadly, what with their slow draw speed. Even their throwables make them feel distinct. Ellie uses her mines and smoke bombs as area control, while Abby just blows stuff to smithereens. Lastly, Abby and Ellie each have a unique perk at the end of one of their respective upgrade trees. Ellie gains Endure, allowing her to slip away from lethal damage and makes it easier to escape and regroup. Abby learns Momentum, which turns each melee kill into a string of vicious beatdowns. Each tool in their arsenal helps define their character, instinctually teaching the player who these women are through how it feels to embody them. By the end of the game, you know that Ellie is stealthy, resourceful, and slippery, and that Abby is powerful, brutal, and efficient. And the game didn't even need to say it. It all gets spelled out with every step you take as a player. Character-focused design can also function as a tutorial of sorts. Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice wants you to play it like a true ninja warrior, and the player character plays a big role in setting that expectation. I mean, just look at him. He's all sharp angles and points, with his primary colors being ash gray and a burnt orange that gets dyed red either with the tint of sunset or the gallons of blood you spill. You know straight off the bat that this dude knows how to kill, but more than that, you know how he kills. Sekiro is a creature of pure violence, applying pressure to his enemies nearly as much as they pressure him. But he's also cunning and crafty. He's a shinobi, somewhere between a samurai and a ninja. While you were out coveting immortality, he was studying the blade, like a samurai. But also, like a ninja, you do a sneak, you do a stab, and if push comes to shove, you do a big fireball. From the first time you see his character model, the game is preparing you for how it wants you to play it, aggressively. If you sit back and tank hits and wait for your moment, it won't come, because you'll have been steamrolled 20 minutes before it would have arrived. But if you play like the forceful, uncompromising killer Sekiro is, you won't have any trouble. Because killers don't wait for opportunities. They create them. The upgrades you find along your journey also help reinforce what type of warrior Sekiro is meant to be. His secondary weapons are all hidden within his prosthetic, allowing them to act as surprises in the midst of combat. You thought you were just fighting an average run-of-the-mill swordsman, but holy shit, he's got a knife! And an axe, and a spear, and a flamethrower, and a weird finger whistle. Okay, that one doesn't fit, but you get what I'm saying, right? One of the best moments in the game is when you fight your father, a fellow shinobi, and realize just how annoying it is to fight someone with a bag of tricks as deep as your own. The grunt enemy design also points you in the right direction with its use of specific weaknesses. This big ogre guy isn't taking much health damage because of his armor, then yank it off with your spear. Overwhelmed by an unreasonably large crowd of wild apes? Deafen them with firecrackers. Sick of all these fucking ghost pricks? Well, just bust out your purple umbrella, hide under it while they're attacking, then pop out with your magically enhanced counter move and bop, 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 dead. You're welcome, by the way, that technique will save you so much time. And you don't just find these weak points through trial and error either. Enemies spell them out in optional eavesdrop conversations that you can only find through stealthily exploring the nooks and crannies of the world. Each of these weaknesses act as a lock, and the key isn't just the particular tool that exploits it, it's the particular play style the developers intended. Aggressive swordplay, tactical tool usage, and stealthy exploration. Every aspect of the gameplay reinforces the character, and every element of the character is reflected in the gameplay. And somehow, even with millions of dollars backing it up, it's still not the best example of building character through design. I think it's about time you met Chris. Chris is a little piece of shit. He's short and weak and annoying, not like my boy Thomas. The second Chris steps on screen, you just know he's going to be trouble. He's envious, he's needy, he's just a big old pile of sour grapes. Oh, and also he's a square? Did I forget to mention that? Yeah, he's literally just an orange square. He's like the main character of the Impossible game without the chutzpah. And yet, in spite of the fact that he has the simplest visual design of any of the characters I've talked about for this video, or really any character that exists, I still immediately understood him because when Thomas jumps, he goes like this, and when Chris jumps, he goes like this. Chris is such a brilliant example of counterpoint. He only works as a character because he's introduced after 10 levels of playing exclusively as Thomas. Thomas, you see, was alone. Thomas Was Alone is an incredibly simple platformer. There are no enemies, no power-ups, just up and to the right. And because of this simplicity, you grow accustomed to how a character feels so fast you hardly even notice it. After 10 levels, Thomas's movement feels second nature. You know his jump like the back of your hand. And then Chris shows up, and everything that became so habitual when playing as Thomas works to reinforce Chris's position as second banana. I mentioned that his jump is wimpy, but something I noticed while replaying the game for this video is that he also moves way slower. Where Thomas felt effortless, controlling Chris feels strenuous. Every jump is a struggle. Chris's entrance also introduces the game's favorite piece of level design, staircases. For the first 10 levels, Thomas climbs up a couple of staircases, but from Chris's introduction forward, they become a fixture, and Chris is always the one relying on others to succeed. Even those visuals that I said were so simple still play their part, with Thomas's bright red diminishing Chris's drab orange. This all reinforces Chris's feelings of inadequacy and resentment. And since these feelings are conveyed mechanically, it makes the player empathize with him. Chris transforms Thomas Was Alone from a simple platformer to a game about personality and group dynamics and how it feels to be a person with a body. As the game plays out and the stakes raise, you feel as Chris grows from being living baggage you have to drag uphill, to a teammate just trying to contribute, to the emotional core of the group. There's more heart in that little square than you'd think would fit. And when the game finally delivers a level where Chris is alone, you feel how scary it must be to be a little guy in a big hostile world, unable to care for yourself, forced to rely on the generosity of those around you. It's a lonely life when you're orange. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that there is also a narrator in the game telling you about the personalities of all the characters throughout the whole game.
Thomas was alone.
But while he is funny and evocative and definitely adds to the game, I don't think he's necessary. You know Chris is weak from his jump. You know he's jealous by seeing his color next to Thomas. You know he's dependent, even codependent in places, because the shape of the world forces you to experience it firsthand. If anything I've said about Thomas Was Alone has piqued your interest and you're thinking of giving it a try, I dare you to play it with the VO turned off. The design of this game is so on point, I promise you the characters will speak for themselves. So what have we learned? Well, for starters, if you don't realize that gameplay is a massive part of playing games, then I don't know what to do with you. And while it may not be 100% necessary, character-focused design can be incredibly powerful, both in the realm of play conditioning and storytelling. It really takes advantage of the unique capabilities of the medium. Gaming as an art form relies on empathy, and what better way is there to build empathy than having your player experience what it feels like to be your character, warts and all. The first part of play is to step into the shoes of the character you're controlling, and if those shoes are built to fit just right, then you can freely step into these virtual worlds and fully experience all they have to offer. From post-apocalyptic Seattle to the fields of Hyrule, from the lands of the Ashina to the inside of a computer, if you want to see what those worlds feel like, first you have to feel what it's like to be a person who lives there. Thanks for watching.